ICU beds and medical oxygen. Now, crematoriums and burial grounds were brought to their knees as hundreds of thousands lost their lives. Now, as India stares at an incoming third wave, we'll now take a look back at what went wrong earlier in the year.
Raza Haider and his family are mourning the loss of their loved ones to COVID-19. Earlier this year, they lost 4 members of their family to COVID-19 within a span of 10 days. Haider himself struggled with severe symptoms of COVID for 47 days. He still recounts the horrors of the second wave in India.
By the look of it, it was like the citizenry was left alone to fend for themselves. One could reach hospital but could just wait. They want beds available for people. And they could have, easily that could have been organized. You know, you have to just think and organize in advance. You think like this is a pandemic and then you work for that. If that effort is not there, nothing will happen, nothing.
At the height of the second wave, many patients died outside hospitals because of lack of beds and medical aid. India's healthcare infrastructure faced acute shortages of medical oxygen and critical medicines as well.
Under normal circumstances, the national need for medical oxygen per day is about 2,000 tons. In the middle of the second wave, it went up to 11,000 tons a day, 5 times that. So we are now talking about the fact that the quantum of people who got sick, went into ICUs or hospitals, was so high that we were creaking. We didn't know whether we'll be able to handle it.
This graveyard is just a few kilometers from Delhi, and this section was specially created to bury those who died due to COVID-19. In the last few months, many states in India have added more numbers to the deaths due to the pandemic, giving credence to all those reports which say that India undercounted deaths. As the death toll rose, crematoria and burial grounds ran out of space for the dead. Many others did not get a proper farewell as their bodies were found floating in the river Ganges. But what led to so many deaths in India?
Delta was much more virulent than the Alpha. Okay. And it is also true that the younger people were a little more confident of themselves that we would not get affected, or even if we get affected, it'll be mild and we are so immune and we are so young, and all that myth was blown away because enough young people died also. So that's why it's not sparing anybody.
Elections are due in many states early next year, and already election rallies are being held with thousands gathering, ignoring COVID-appropriate behavior. Will such congregations become super spreader events leading to a third wave? Ravinder Bawa, CGTN, Delhi.
Meanwhile, several countries across Europe will ring in the new year under a raft of restrictions as EU states continue to grapple with surging cases of the Omicron variant of COVID-19. Now, in the past week, France, Greece, Portugal, Italy and Spain all set daily records for positive cases. The World Health Organization warns that the simultaneous circulation of different strains is now driving a wave of infections. Here's Benji Haya reporting from Brussels.
For many in Europe, New Year's Eve last year was spent under lockdown. Few could have imagined that 12 months later, people would be bidding farewell to 2021 under fresh COVID-19 restraints. Paris's famous New Year's Eve celebrations have officially been scrapped. The concerts on the Champs-Élysées cancelled. Large gatherings aren't allowed in Germany either. Only 10 people can legally congregate there. That means no big events in Berlin and other major cities. Instead, a small fireworks display will be broadcast live on TV. In Italy, public events are banned. Greece has called off its festivities normally held at iconic sites, including the Acropolis in Athens. The Spanish capital, Madrid, is one of just a few European capitals where public celebrations will go ahead. Authorities are limiting numbers to 7,000. Attendees are required to wear masks and observe social distancing. Meanwhile, London's New Year's Eve event in Trafalgar Square is off. It had been organised to replace the fireworks, which usually attract thousands of visitors to the banks of the River Thames. Yet pubs and nightclubs in England are open, Boris Johnson resisting calls to impose curbs. In its New Year's Eve message, the UK's Prime Minister says Britain is incomparably better in terms of the position to fight against COVID-19 than it was at the end of 2020. That's because of vaccinations. As Europe embraces 2022, the focus is turning to how to deal with this pandemic in the long term. Greece following Italy and Spain in easing its isolation rules in an effort to keep key industries afloat which have been suffering from shortages of staff. And from January 4th, Germany will allow fully vaccinated Brits to enter without the need for quarantine. Benji Haya, CGTN, Brussels.
Now, as we usher in the new year, CGTN anchors who have diligently brought to you the news as it breaks throughout 2021, they've also taken their time to wish you a happy new year in 2022. Let's listen in.
Thank you to all our viewers for your continued support for CGTN. This year has been a challenging one with the coronavirus pandemic, but China's made tremendous efforts in fighting the virus and helping the international community with vaccines. I believe we have so much to look forward to in the coming year as we build a better future for all mankind. On behalf of the Beijing team, I wish all of you a happy new year.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to CGTN's Europe Hub in London. Few of us in this part of the world will look back on 2021 as a vintage year. The pandemic has separated far too many family and friends. So as we look towards 2022, let's hope the new year offers hope of the beginning of the end of the pandemic. From all of us at CGTN in London, Happy New Year.
Shinyin Kuai-la. Hi there, Mike Walter coming to you from Washington, D.C. at CGTN America, our broadcast center, where we just celebrated our 10th anniversary. And I want to wish all of you a prosperous 2022. We're really looking forward to the Year of the Tiger, the Olympics in Beijing. Gua Nin Hao.
If there's one thing we've learned, it's that as a community of nations, we are stronger together. So my wish for 2022 is that come what may, be it climate or conflict or future pandemics, may Africa work as one. Happy New Year.
Well, let's head to South Africa now, where the government has lifted a nighttime curfew between midnight and 4 a.m. with immediate effect. Minister in the presidency, Mondi Gungubele, issued the statement on Thursday. Now, Gungubele also said indoor gatherings are now limited to 1,000 people, while outdoor functions should have an attendance not exceeding 2,000 people. The decree is inspired by the belief that the country has overcome the fourth wave dominated by the Omicron variant. The government is also confident there is improved healthcare capacities and increased vaccine uptake among South Africans. The Ministry of Health has also reported fewer infection rates in the past week. Now, statistics from the Ministry of Health indicate a decrease in coronavirus cases of about 30%. That's despite Omicron's fast spread. The numbers also show that there are fewer hospitalizations. Cabinet has, however, urged South Africans to remain vigilant in the fight against COVID-19, of course, observing rules like wearing of masks. Meanwhile, a study from the South African Medical Research Council has revealed that 2 doses of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine slashed hospitalizations caused by the Omicron variant in South Africa by up to 85%. Now, researchers say the findings are critical since the shot is being increasingly relied upon across the continent. The results are a welcome bit of news as the explosive rise of Omicron pushes the world to a record number of daily cases. Africa's infections now stand at over 9 million, posing a threat to economic recovery plans. Now in Tanzania, the country has signed a contract with Turkish firm Yapi Merkezi to build a 368-kilometer section of a standard gauge railway that is expected to cost about $1.9 billion. It is all part of a 1,219-kilometer line that will eventually link Dar es Salaam, the commercial hub on the shores of the Indian Ocean, to the port city of Mwanza on the shores of Lake Victoria, which shares a border with Kenya and Uganda. Here's CGTN's Isaac Lukando with more.
Over the next 4 years, Turkish company Yapi Merkezi will design and build a 368-kilometer section of Tanzania's standard gauge railway. The first two phases, spanning 705 kilometers, were completed by the same company at a cost of around $3 billion.
The government is collecting taxes, but there is also employment. In the ongoing construction, there are some 17,000 people directly employed, and we estimate that indirectly there are some 100,000 people that are employed.
Tanzania's standard gauge railway has a gauge width similar to the one built by China in neighboring Kenya. The government sees this as an opportunity to extend the railway to other countries in Eastern Africa, helping to boost trade.
The transportation of large volumes of cargo by rail will reduce the cost of transportation for local and international clients who use our ports. This will make our ports competitive against other ports in the East African region, as well as the Southern African Development Cooperation area, contributing to the growth of our economy.
The railway is part of several large infrastructure projects currently being implemented by the Tanzanian government. It is already working on a 2,115 megawatt hydropower dam, a liquefied natural gas project, and a crude oil pipeline from Uganda. Once operational, Tanzania's standard gauge railway will be the third such project in East Africa. The government hopes that it will be the vehicle that carries the economic hopes of the country and the region. Despite the railway's touted benefits, the government's main challenge has been financing. Preferring to borrow to fund the project, President Hassan has rejected critics' claims that an increasing national debt will hurt the country's economy.
The investment in this railway so far is $6.3 billion. If we won't continue with its construction and complete it, the money we have sunk into it will have gone to waste. So by any means possible, we will borrow, looking at simple, appropriate ways to borrow money, because we can't get this type of money through levies and taxes alone.
Completion of all 5 phases of the railway project is still years away. The government hopes that as each section is completed, Tanzania's economy can accelerate down the tracks. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
You're watching The World Today. Let's head into a short break now, but do stay with us. Lots more news after this.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
So this is it, I'm just about to be shot.
The little tents here, bottles are being thrown. As they do so,
there are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
Is the front line now after 9 days of fighting?
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from the front
clear
line.
View of this front line position.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Now, pressure is increasing on African nations to help tackle climate change by reining in their greenhouse gas emissions and resisting the temptation to develop new oil and gas fields. But Africa accounts for just 4% of global GHG emissions between 1990 and 2017. And that's despite the fact that it contains about 17% of the world's population. In addition, African per capita emissions are about a fifth of the global average. And that leads critics to complain that radical action, especially in the oil and gas sector on the continent, will stifle potential economic development for a problem that has largely been created elsewhere. Well, let's now discuss this further with Ronke Onadeko. She's a principal consultant at DRNL Consult. Great to have you with us on the show today, Ronke. Now, of course, there's a lot of argument from oil-producing nations that this narrative that the energy transition will be from hydrocarbons to renewables, they say that misrepresents the science, especially when we talk about reining in the oil and gas sector. Do you agree with this sentiment?
I totally agree with that. We're not the cause of the problem, and we're not quite where the Western world is in terms of their industrialization. I mean, they've scaled the hurdle of building infrastructure, taking care of so many of the other sectors, and we're not quite there. And my belief is that first and foremost, every country should, and every nation at that, should focus on what their lowest hanging fruits are, to focus on what is the easiest, cheapest, least disruptive type of technology and resource to exploit for their nation. I don't know why we're being saddled with the Western world's narrative on moving to renewable. For example, in Nigeria, I mean, we are very rich in coal, we're very rich in gas. I mean, those are the next frontiers for us to conquer, not renewables. We do not produce any of the bits that go into renewables, not the panels, not the batteries. So why are we moving to renewables when we still have our coal and our natural gas and the oil to exploit?
Well, looking at after this year's COP26 conference, of course, the question has been posed, are African governments even ready realistically to abandon any further development in the oil and gas sector anytime soon, as of course they weigh the economic benefits against the environmental costs? And also, are the critics who say any radical action in this direction will certainly stifle economic development in Africa going forward?
We've definitely been reliant on foreign direct investment for the energy sector, the exploration, exploitation, transportation, even the human resource in that area. However, I think this is the time that Africa really needs to sit in and pivot. There's so many other creative ways in which we can actually take charge of the industry and the sector and start finding other means of financing exploitation of our natural resources. There are things that the Western world need from us for technology industry, chips and things in computers and all of that. And we need to sit down, work as a continent and actually negotiate terms that are favorable to us so that we do generate the income we want independently and utilize the funds generated to expand and exploit the sectors that we choose to. We shouldn't be under the thumb of the Western world as to how we get funding and what we have to use our funding for. And I think the drying up of foreign direct investment in this sector is actually going to be a game changer for Africa, in the sense that we're going to find more creative ways to generate funds and start to do things our own way, in our own pace.
Well, let's now delve further into the solutions on the table for Africa's oil and gas sector. Now, some experts point to the fact that a large proportion of the extractive industry's emissions, they actually come from the power consumed during oil and gas production. Some of them are suggesting let's turn to renewables instead to generate that power, and that could be a solution. What are your thoughts on that, and of course the other solutions on the table?
First and foremost, I mean, I think it's absolutely outrageous that that any expert is saying that emissions are, heavier on our side in terms of exploration of hydrocarbons. If you look at Bitcoin mining, for example, one Bitcoin mining uses or utilizes the equivalent of 53 days worth of power in an average US home. And that's being done largely in China. And they're not even using clean energy. China is using coal. So I really don't understand if it's that the African leaders that sit in this industry or should be responding to the international world are not speaking up, or they don't have the right facts, or they're just not focused on this, because we have issues, huge, big issues that are not power related. I mean, we're still struggling with our healthcare, we're struggling with education, we're struggling with infrastructure. So I don't think the focus for us right now is on the source of electricity, power source, or emissions. But that narrative is incorrect. Emissions are not largely coming from exploitation of our natural resource, the hydrocarbons. That is not a fact.
Well, we do have to leave it there, Ronke. All right.
Some of the options I would actually prefer, in realistic terms, is everybody should go into whatever is the lowest hanging fruit. For us in Nigeria, it's still oil, it's still gas, it's still coal. However, because the whole world is moving and we don't want to be left behind, we definitely should start exploiting things like hydro, solar, but I don't think it's going to be a one or nothing. Right. I think it's going to be a combination of, perhaps for us, 80% of hydrocarbons, gas, and coal, and maybe 20%, and we would ramp it up to make sure that we have a good balance. In Europe, for example, they might want to do 99% renewables and 1% gas, for example. But I don't think anybody should dictate to any nation what they should do and how fast they should get to the zero hydrocarbon state.
Quite right. Well, many thanks, Ronke, for those great insights. We do have to leave it there. That, of course, is Ronke Onadeko. She's joining us there in Nigeria from DRNL Consult. Well, still on climate change issues, let's turn our attention to South Africa now. The country remains the 12th largest emitter of carbon dioxide in the world, and that's largely because of its reliance on coal for electricity, which makes up about 40% of the country's emissions. Plans, however, are underway to reduce emissions by 60% by 2030, as Sumitra Naidu now reports from Johannesburg.
A task team is negotiating the terms of a landmark climate finance deal for South Africa's transition to a low-carbon economy. The $8.5 billion finance pledge was announced at the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow, Scotland, in November by the EU, Germany, France, the UK and the US.
This support will take the form of various financial instruments, ranging from grants to concessional loans at very low interest rates. This funding will be mobilized over the next 3 to 5 years with a view to longer-term engagement. If we finally reach agreement and accept the offer.
South Africa raised its ambition to cut greenhouse gases at COP26, signaling a commitment to accelerate its decarbonization plans. This will mean moving away from coal. State utility Eskom depends on coal to generate 90% of the country's electricity.
What is required now
is for Eskom's plan, which was given a lot of positive recognition at COP26, and that is why it was able to attract some capital, not adequately, but some capital for the pilot project at Komati to actually be initiated in a way in which workers are protected.
I think Eskom, like utilities around the world, have started to realize that the economics of coal have just changed fundamentally in the last 10 years. So not only is it now apparent that new coal is no longer competitive, that new coal is more expensive than alternatives.
All eyes on the Mpumalanga province, where the coal value chain makes up over half of the local economy. Thousands of jobs are at risk as South Africa rolls out decommissioning plans for several power stations reaching their end of life.
I think it's very much important for South Africa. We put our own terms on the table and say we are borrowing this money or we're receiving this money at such an interest rate or at an interest rate of 1% because we don't want to indebt ourselves any further because the money will be used wisely, I think.
The Just Energy Transition pilot project will begin in Komati Port, Mpumalanga next year, when Eskom's oldest power station will be taken offline and repurposed for the production of off-grid solar power containers and green hydrogen. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's now shift our focus to Europe. January 1st, 2022 marks exactly 1 year since a historic UK-EU trade deal came into force. The agreement, signed in December 2020, days before the deadline, sets out Britain's relationship with the European Union from outside of the bloc after almost half a century of membership. Benji Haya now reports from Brussels on the feeling in the EU's capital 12 months after that deal.
Christmas Eve 2020, following years of negotiations, finally a breakthrough.
At the end of a successful negotiations journey, I normally feel joy. But today, I only feel quiet satisfaction and, frankly speaking, relief.
And where are you going to take this one?
That was the EU's immediate reaction to this, a new trade deal which was implemented exactly a year ago.
Good, well thank you very much everybody.
Until the end of the Brexit transition period, Britain effectively stayed part of the EU's customs union and single market. Yet this deal meant an end to freedom of movement of people and goods. The value of UK products exported across the English Channel fell by nearly half in the first month of 2021. And whilst that has recovered slightly, imports to Europe from Britain are on average 13% below pre-pandemic levels. For many, it's not just about the facts and figures, but their identity. At a vigil held on New Year's Eve last year in Brussels, British expats mourned Brexit. People here compared it to a family separation, a divorce. A year on, one attendee believes it's time to rebuild connections.
Why do we still need to cooperate? Why is that a good thing for the UK? It doesn't take anything away from your nationalism and your identity, but it gives you something in terms of cooperating on the big challenges of the day, sharing information, expertise, pooling, not duplicating, and maintaining rights and standards in so many areas, which is what the European Union is about. And it was never about the EU imposing on Britain. It was about us together working out how to work together and have prosperity and stability together.
Plenty, though, is still left unresolved, notably fishing. It's an industry that accounts for less than 1% of the EU's GDP, but it's politically significant. France is threatening legal action, arguing not enough licences have been granted to French fishermen to catch in British waters.
The UK authorities have to drink Red Bull. They have to speed up a bit because we have been waiting. We are losing money and it's starting to be hard even for our morale, for our health.
And then there's the ongoing dispute over the Northern Ireland Protocol. To prevent a hard border with the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland was kept in the EU's single market, so customs checks have been imposed internally with the rest of the UK.
Morning, Mom.
Britain's newly appointed Brexit negotiator, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, is threatening to tear up the agreement if changes aren't made. European Commission Vice President Maroš Šefčovič warns the entire deal would collapse if the protocol was scrapped. The challenge for the EU will be to find a solution that appeals to all its 27 member states, and also to navigate a future without a traditional political ally, which in the past contributed billions of dollars to its annual budget. Yet with Britain gone, new opportunities have emerged. Collaboration on defence, a possible investment pact with China, and a reinventing of transatlantic relations, as the European Union looks to move on from Brexit. Benji Haya, CGTN, Brussels.
You're watching The World Today. We're heading into a short break now, but do stay tuned. More on the year ahead and, of course, the year so far after this.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN. Welcome back. Well, let's head to Zimbabwe now. After two successive droughts, the country bounced back to food self-sufficiency in 2021. Now, a good rainy season increased output of major crops, which had a positive effect on the entire economy. From Harare, CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya now reports on Zimbabwe's agricultural boom that, of course, has sparked the country's economic recovery.
Production of grains was spurred by a conservation farming technique that's aimed at mitigating climate change. More than 2.2 million households were supplied with inputs to roll it out.
They were required to adopt all the tenets and the principles of conservation agriculture, including minimum soil disturbance, mulching, the religious adoption of crop rotation. So it was quite a flagship program, and it contributed significantly. In fact, it contributed over 40% to the national grain or maize output.
By the end of November, more than 1.2 million tons of grain had been delivered, compared to just 327,000 tons at the same time last year. Other crops also grew, including tobacco, where deliveries rose 13%, and cotton, which achieved its highest yield in 5 years. Overall, agriculture grew by 34% this year, and that's had a ripple effect on the entire economy, which will expand by more than 6%.
Both the food and the cash crops, I think there was a huge increase in output, which obviously also had a positive effect on the industrial sector. We CZI has already said that they're expecting capacity utilization to end the year at about 61%, and it's largely on account of the huge inputs coming from agriculture.
To sustain the performance, government launched an agricultural recovery plan to address 4 critical Ps.
P number 1 is production. We definitely have to upscale our production. P number 2 is productivity. We need to upscale our productivity. In fact, that's our smartest way out of the woods in terms of food insecurity. Then the other P is obviously profitability, especially at farmhold level. That's the other P. And then, of course, the last P is partnerships and collaborations.
The latter encourages private funding for farmers.
It is a good thing that this past season has already shown us that there is room and capacity to grow. All we need to do is to reconfigure the financing of agriculture so that we bring in more sustainable means to produce and crowd in private sector so that the private sector is more involved in the actual production.
Contract farming arrangements that have been hugely successful in tobacco are being extended to other crops. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Now, Tanzania, Africa's 4th largest gold producer, got its first ever gold refinery plant this year. Gold refineries, of course, are part of authorities' plans to increase Tanzania's mining sector contribution to GDP to about 10% from the current 6.7% by 2025. Here's CGTN's Isaac Lukando with more from Dar es Salaam.
In June this year, Tanzania launched a $3.8 million gold refinery plant in the country's northern city of Mwanza. Employing 120 Tanzanians directly, the refinery is expected to boost the country's gold revenues, but it is small miners that the government believes will benefit the most.
The presence of a refinery will enable our small-scale miners to first obtain a reliable market, to get a definite price, and also be able to sell their gold in a secure place.
A second refinery established in the country's Geita region now gives Tanzania a capacity to refine a total of 960 kilograms of gold a day. Analysts say this, coupled with the establishment of mineral markets across the country, is attracting foreign mineral traders.
I've had a lot of people flocking from DRC to come and sell gold in our markets because our markets now are a little bit stabilized. There is a very clear system of selling gold. You sell, you pay your tax, you're given a certificate, and you're free to move wherever you want to go, which was not the case back in the day.
Concerns over revenue losses due to poor oversight led the government to reform the mining sector in 2017, including banning the export of raw minerals. With the new reforms, the Central Bank of Tanzania reported that last year alone, earnings from gold exports rose 34%. With over $3 billion worth of gold exports last year, mining is one of Tanzania's fastest growing sectors. The establishment of 2 gold refineries this year is expected to boost revenues and improve the lives of some 1.2 million people who depend on the mining sector. Tanzania now ranks 3rd in Africa in terms of gold refining capacity. But analysts argue the country's current refineries are not enough to meet growing demand.
Talk of Rwanda, talk of Uganda, talk of Congo, talk of Mozambique. Those people will be flocking in to come into our market and try to sell or to refine their gold. So those two are not enough. So if we think big at a regional scale, we are yet to get there.
The Tanzanian government has issued some 5,000 mining licenses in the last 5 years alone. With increased refining capabilities, the government believes that gold and other minerals will propel the country towards greater prosperity. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Now, as 2021 comes to an end, here's a quick recap of the performance of Egypt's stock market during the year and, of course, the impact of the successful IPO of eFinance on its capital market. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
It's been a volatile period for the stock market since the outbreak of the coronavirus in March 2020. The stock market EGX has seen a downturn for a year and a half, until eFinance, a state-owned fintech company, took the risk and offered its shares to the public in October 2021.
We were afraid like the other companies in the last few months, but we changed our minds and took the decision after a roadshow where we met 120 investment funds, which included corporates and foreign investment banks. We found they had a big appetite. They confirmed to us they will buy a huge number of shares. We discovered we were on solid ground to enter the stock exchange with the investor confidence.
The response was overwhelming. 26% of the company was offered. That's 417 million shares. The shares were 7 times oversubscribed by institutions, including 12 foreign funds, and 61 times oversubscribed by retail investors. Foreigners accounted for 72% of the total investors. But why has e-finance managed to create such a buzz amidst the COVID-induced recession?
This type of company was lacking in the Egyptian market. There was only one fintech company, which is Fawry, that specialized in e-payments. But e-finance also works in e-payments and in building the infrastructure for digital transformation and IT, a sector that is very promising and attractive for foreign investors.
E-finance IPO has had an instant impact on the EGX. Before the e-finance IPO, the market was suffering from weak trade volumes of below $64 million a day. Since the e-finance IPO, trade volumes rebounded to exceed $96 million in the first 10 sessions after the listing. It reached $160 million in the following 10 sessions. As for e-finance company, on the first day of trading on the 20th of October, its share price was at $0.896 and it jumped to $1.6 by end of the year. And officials are building on this momentum to stimulate the market further.
All our efforts are geared towards improving the business climate. Along with the government, we announced a set of regulations to make a positive impact. For example, we put only 10% tax on share swaps in the event of a sale. This will definitely encourage companies to acquire others through share swaps. This will attract big companies and will also help small companies grow by share swaps acquisitions. It's very important.
Analysts expect a strong recovery going into 2022 now that the government has announced it will conduct IPOs for 5 state-owned companies and banks in the first quarter of the year. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, across the world, many nations are ushering in the new year. Well, here are the pictures from Australia, one of the first to celebrate the arrival of 2022. The country kicked off the new year in spectacular fashion with a huge firework display over Sydney. And that's it for the World Today's special edition. Thank you for watching. Happy New Year 2022.